friends, it's Christy Gets Crafty here for Lawnfawn. Today I'm going to be making a card using Toucan Do It, Party Animal, and Critters in the Jungle, just the little leaves from that one. So I've stamped my images out in jet black ink on some Spectrum Noir Ultra Smooth Premium White cardstock, and I'll be coloring with my Copic markers. I'm starting with my Jaguar, and for her I'm using YR20, YR21, and YR23. I'm using that YR23 to lay in a little shadow down the back side of her body, just give it some definition. And then I'm going to come in with my midtone, the YR21, and begin to blend that out. I started out going around the spots just because it's my habit to do so, but really if you're going to color them darker in a gray or black or brown, you probably don't have to skip over the dots, and later on I'm going to end up coloring over some of them. So I'm using YR20 as my highlight shade. And then to warm her up and give her a little bit more of a golden shade, I'm going to add in a little bit of Y13. And this is where I'm going right over some of those spots, but you'll never notice in the final card. So I'm going to also use these shades to color the toucan's face. This time I'm starting at the bottom with the YR23, blending up with the YR21, and then the YR20, and then the Y13 I'm laying over the lighter two shades. I'm going to do the candle on the top of the cake with the YR23 and Y13, and I'm also going to color the bottom of the cake with those shades. I'll do the circles on the butterfly's wings just using the YR23 and the Y13 since that's such a small little area, and I'm going to do the same for the mouthpiece on the air horn. Next I'm going to do the Jaguars Spots, and I picked some warm grays for that. I'm using W3, W5, and W7. So again, I'm going to start with that W7 and just lay in a little bit of shadow. And I'm also going to color in her nose with these shades. So once I have the W7, I'm going to come in with the W5. And even in those tiny little areas, I'm going to try to leave room for all three shades so I get some nice dimension. And I'm making sure to color over the edge of that W7 so that I get a nice smooth blend so it looks soft like fur. And then I'm going to come in with my lightest shade, the W3, to add some highlights. Once I finish her up, I'm going to continue using these markers to color in the toucan. And for him, I'm going to take that W7 and just outline the bottom edge of each of the little sections of his wing. Also bring that color up the back of his head and down his tail and on his belly. And then I'm going to begin to blend that out with the W5. Again, just coloring over the very edge of that W7 so that it smooths the transition between the shades since that W7 is quite dark. And then I'll bring the W3 in to fill in the rest of the image. I will do a second layer of this off screen just to smooth out that blend and really increase that saturation and make him look a little bit more black than gray. And I'll also use them to edge my butterfly's wings. I like to tie in a color in 3 different places at least on a card if I can. So I wanted to have one more place where that black showed up. And then I'm moving on to some pinks. I'm using R00, R11, and R20 to color in the first section of the toucan's beak. I'm also going to use these shades to color in the frosting on the little cake, just adding a little of that R20 on the outside edge and on the right side of the scallops, and then blending out with the R11 and then the R00. I'll do the ribbon on the gift with these pink shades as well, just using the darkest down at the bottom and blending toward the top where the light would be hitting it the most. And I'm going to also add 2 stripes on my party hat. So I'm just going to add that darkest on the left-hand side since the hat is going to be tipped in that direction. The last thing that I'm going to color with these pinks is the balloon. So I put the R20 down at the bottom and then up the left-hand side, kind of doing a semicircle shape, and then blend it out with the R11 and then the R00. And the R00 was so light that it really pushed back the other 2 shades, so I went over that with a second layer to smooth that out. And then I'm going to move on to some reds. I picked R24, R29, and R39. I'm going to do the next section of the toucan's beak, starting with the R39, and then the R29, and then the R24. And then I'm also going to do some more stripes on the party hat. I just did the ones that were right below the pink on that. And then to tie in the red one more place, I'm going to do the top of the butterfly's wings. I'll do the bottom half in a different color. So I just put the darkest color close to the body and blended with the lighter shades toward the outside edge. And then I'm going to bring in some turquoise. I chose BG32, BG45, and BG49. I'm going to do the bottom half of the butterfly's wings and also the little party hat. I'm going to do them both at once since they're such small areas to color in. Then I'm going to do my gift down at the bottom in these shades and also the end of the toucan's beak. So I'm just trying to stick to a really limited color palette. I like doing that sometimes because it makes me make unexpected choices of colors, and I always like how it turns out. I think it's fun to kind of just limit yourself and see where that takes you in a scene. So I'm going to finish with this little party horn up at the top. And then I'll move on to my tiny tree branch. I'm using E55 and E57 for that. Just the 2 shades since it's really skinny, but I did go back and do a second layer on that. And then I'm going to use my final shade, which is green, and I picked YG00, YG01, YG03, and YG05. I'm using that YG05 to add a line down the center of these larger leaves, and then blending that out with the YG03. And then I used the YG01 as the highlight and realized I didn't need that lightest shade after all. I decided to just stick with the 3. So I'm going to go back and do the larger leaf. These are both from Critters in the Jungle, using that YG05, also adding a little bit of color on the bottom edge of each little section, and then blending out with the lighter 2 shades. And then finally I'll do the leaves on the little branch. That's going to complete my coloring. So I'm going to grab a black Sakura Jelly Roll marker and just scribble that off to the side until it's getting nice and juicy. And then I'll go over the eyes of my 2 critters to make them nice and bright and shiny again. And then I will trim these images out with their matching dies. I'm going to create my background directly on my card base today. So I have that folded and scored at the top, and then I'm going to take the Tropical Leaves background stencils. I'm going to hold that firmly in place. You could tape it down, but I decided just to hold it down. I'm going to blend on some salvaged patina Distress Oxide ink, which is very similar in color to the Mermaid cardstock. So I'm going to get a really subtle tone-on-tone look, which is exactly what I'm going for. So I'm just working my way around that stencil, holding that down and shifting as needed until I can fill in all of those gorgeous little leaves. And I am pressing down rather firmly with my mini ink blending tool just because I want to have a nice concentration of ink on that background so that the leaves clearly stand out. Even though I'm going for a subtle look, I still want you to be able to see them. So I'm going to finish up with these last few leaves over on the side, and then I will remove that stencil so you can see where we're at so far. You could leave it there, but I decided to use the second layer as well. So I'm just figuring out where that goes so that the leaves fit between the leaves I've already done, and you can see through the stencil so it's easy to line up. And then I'm going to continue with those so that my background is really nice and full. You could also do these in a different shade. I almost did them in white, and I think that would look cool too, but I decided that, you know, I just wanted it to be that subtle background and that your eye would really be drawn to the focal image in the center. So I decided to just keep it all one shade, and I really like how that added so much dimension in the background. I've cut down a piece of peacock cardstock to be slightly larger than the reverse stitch scallop square windows. This is the second largest in that die set. I'm going to tape that in place and run that through my die cutting machine to create a little frame. And then I also cut down a piece of cilantro cardstock with the grassy border. I've added some foam tape to the back of that frame, and I'm going to use that to pick up my grassy border. I'll set that aside and pop my card base in my MISTI so I can stamp my sentiment. I started out using some jet black ink, just the same ink that I used for my images, to stamp out "Have a Wild Day," but regular dye inks have a really hard time laying on top of the Distress Oxide since they have that kind of cloudy look to them. So I switched to VersaFine Onyx Black because it is a pigment ink. It just lays on top of the oxide inks a little bit better, so I got a nice crisp impression. And then I opened up that card base so I could stamp on the inside using peacock ink. And I'm stamping the other jaguar and the butterfly and trail, plus a gift and the sentiment that says "Happy Birthday" from the Party Animal stamp set. So now that I've got all of my elements done, I'm ready to start assembling this card. I'm going to peel off the rest of the release paper on that frame, add some liquid glue down at the bottom, and then I'm going to line that up right in the center of the card, making sure that the sentiment is not covered up by those scallops or cast in too much shadow there. And then I'll press that down into place. Then I'll bring in my images. I've added some foam tape to the backs of most of those. I'm going to start by adding the two leaves down in the two corners just to kind of set the scene, this little jungle scene, and also kind of reinforce those leaves in the background. And then I'm going to add my jaguar. In my head, it's her birthday, and the toucan is her friend that's bringing her a present. So I'm going to add this little birthday balloon tucked behind her. I'm going to use the large leaf there to kind of hide the bottom of the string as well, so it doesn't look like it's just floating in thin air. It'll look like it's kind of tied to something back there. Then I'll add the small tree branch over on the right hand side, and my toucan is going to be sitting on that. And because he needed his wings for flying, he's going to be carrying his gift for his friend the jaguar on top of his beak. I'm also going to give the jaguar the little party hat, just pop that on top of her head. And then the little party horn and the cake are going to go down in the bottom right, kind of filling up that area in the grass there. I pop those up with some foam tape as well. So I'll just make sure that that is not overlapping too much of the cake so you're still able to see it. And then finally, I'll take the butterfly and add that to the top of the frame, kind of pulling your eye toward that sentiment. As a finishing touch, I'm going to take some Stardust stickles and add a little bit of glitter to the scene just to make it extra fun. I added it to the balloon and to the edges of the butterfly's wings. That wasn't quite dry yet, so I just had to hold it down in place. I'm also going to add it to the frosting on my cake and the bow on the gift. And that is going to complete my card. So I'll lift that up to the camera so you can see how that catches the light. And I'll give you another peek at the inside as well. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. If you did, please hit that like button and leave me a comment down below. I love chatting with you guys. Thank you so much again for watching. I hope you have an amazing day. Bye-bye.